Dear guests, the first panel discussion is Wildfire Prevention. Building Resilient Futures. Please take your seat while our speakers prepare for the panel.
Mr. Nikodimos Damianou, who is the Deputy Minister of Research, Innovation and Digital Policy of Cyprus, and Mr. Flavio Argiarello, Public Policy Manager for Economic and Regulatory Policy at Meta, both for Italy and Cyprus. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure. So I'll be moderating this discussion for the next 30 minutes. We're going to have 20 minutes of discussion, and then we will allocate around 10 minutes for questions from the audience. So let's begin. Dr. Damianou, thanks again for being here. So following the insights of the Draghi report on EU competitiveness released earlier this year, Europe seems to be facing some challenges in digital innovation and infrastructure compared to other regions. With Cyprus preparing to take on the EU presidency, what are the main digital policy priorities the country intends to advance? And which legislative instruments do you see as central to shaping Europe's digital future?
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much. You know you are in the right place when your moderator is holding, instead of papers, is holding a digital device. So thank you again. Good job on being on time, and so happy to see so many young people here. I hope we can make it interesting for them. And good to be here with Flavio. And I want to welcome you to Cyprus. I understand it's your first time. We are becoming more and more popular as politicians as the presidency is approaching, and that's understandable. That's part of what's coming. So with regards to your questions, as you talk about policy interventions and legislative instruments, let's clarify that the subjects that you mentioned are covered in essentially two separate streams that converge to a large extent in Europe. One is a digital stream, let's call it, and that covers also cyber resilience and cyber security. And then the other one is what we call the competitiveness stream. There are two separate councils, but all converge. And of course, we have the space discussion, which is very, very important. Now, before we go to the legislative instruments, I think, and foremost, it's mostly about changing our strategy as Europe, changing our mentality and our approach. And this is, I think you mentioned the Draghi report. The Draghi report captures and reflects this fact very well. Europe needs to move on from its current identity as the regulatory-driven continent into a competitive continent as well, and look at competitiveness more actively, thankfully. And I think this is the first time we are seeing traction in that respect. So it all starts from that. Otherwise, we will be discussing legislative files and regulations without making any progress, and this has happened for many, many years in the past. Now, in terms of the actual files, and by the way, it's not only the Draghi report, it's also a number of other reports. One can mention the Letta report that was commissioned last year by the Belgian presidency, and points to the single market embracing digital and green transition. So it all points to enhance awareness and focus on digital. Now the package that is important, well, Europe has what we call the new digital rule book, and that comprises, of course, the AI Act, the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, and now it seems that on our plate next year will be landing, the ones that will be landing there will be the Digital Networks Act and the EU Cloud and AI Development Act. These are the two most important files from the digital sphere that are coming our way. For us, the Digital Networks Act is about ensuring that we build a competitive and sustainable communications infrastructure towards a single market as well. That's very important. And with regards to the Cloud and AI Development Act, Europe has, and Flavio can correct me, has approximately 25% of the global cloud computing market, but 70+% of that, of the needs for cloud computing within Europe, are currently serviced by non-EU players. So that act is tasked with enhancing EU capacity, EU-owned capacity by 2030 in that respect. And that's part of the efforts to build autonomy, sovereignty, and so on. For us, and I will be quick, we are also interested in pushing forward with the EU business wallet that the proposition is supposedly coming before the end of the year. That's part of what we think is going to simplify procedures, especially for SMEs, and we are particularly interested in SMEs in Cyprus. We are very sensitive with the protection of minors online dimension. That's another thing that we want to focus on, and Cyprus has been one of the few countries who have signed previous declarations in that respect. That's, in a nutshell, what's happening in the digital sphere, and then you have the competitiveness part, and I'm just coming from a competitiveness council in Brussels. The main theme there is the startup and scale-up strategy. The whole point of what the Draghi report is highlighting is that Europe has a lot of activity in terms of launching startups. We have presumably more startups being launched than any other continent. However, they all live and go to the US. So we maintain less than a 10% globally share of new startups. So the same is the situation with researchers and entrepreneurs. We cannot find a way yet to keep them in Europe. So that's a key challenge. And the main legislative instrument there, or act, is the European Innovation Act. And then we move on to the next framework program, the next Horizon program, which together with the digital component of the competitiveness fund will provide much more funding to cover the funding gap that we are facing. This complements initiatives that have already started, like the AI Gigafactories one, and it also pushes forward with support for dual-use technologies, which is very important, especially under the current geopolitical environment that we're living, and also a new approach in terms of research and technology infrastructures, pushing forward with public-private co-investments, which has never happened before, and better industry and research collaboration. But we shouldn't forget about the Space Act. We will have to deal with the Space Act and the space program. And as I said, this is hugely important. It is highlighted in the Draghi report. It's the next technology frontier for us and for Europe, and we need to focus on it. And I think I'll stop here so that we can.
That's great. Thank you very much for these insightful comments. So my second question is addressed to you, Mr. Arzarello. As AI is a central driver of global competitiveness, and Europe seeks to strengthen its position in its rapidly evolving field. Which EU legislative areas do you see as needing reinforcement or elevation to accelerate AI innovation and adoption? And conversely, which existing rules or legislative approaches currently pose obstacles to technological progress, in your opinion?
So, first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a great honor and a great pleasure to be here with you, Joanna, and with Mr. Damianou. Thank you for welcoming so warmly in the beautiful country of Cyprus. And I think this Cyprus Forum is a great occasion and great opportunity to exchange views and to have a very informed conversation around priorities in the digital and business space. So thank you again. So let's take a step back before answering your question. So I think that we all acknowledge that AI is a great opportunity for whole humanity. I would say an unprecedented one. There is an estimate from Goldman Sachs that the impact of AI on the global stage will be an increase in terms of GDP around 10%. There is another estimate about McKinsey on the fact that generative AI specifically can contribute up to 1.2 trillion euro increase in terms of European economy. Now, I think the common challenge we are facing, both as legislators, companies, European citizens, is how we get out the most out of the AI opportunities. And I think there are a series of components, a series of elements which can give us hope. Europe has all the ingredients to have success in the AI field in terms of universities, research centers, talents. Just consider that, for example, every year more than 100,000 students graduate in STEM subjects. And there is an increase around 15% in the last years in students graduating in STEM subjects across Europe. Now, I think the point is what can we do to make Europe better for the talents, for the resources we have? And this is the key point, for example, of the considerations of the Draghi's report, which was already mentioned. I think Europe needs to change something in a really significant way. And also here I want to give you some proof points. So basically at the moment we have around 270 regulators across Europe with very often overlapping competencies and so on and so forth. We have more than 100 pieces of legislation. So I think all this ecosystem needs to be streamlined. And this has to do with the competitiveness of Europe on the global stage. Just to give you an idea, no European companies ranks among the world's top 10 companies. And I think this is a great issue, and this is something that needs to be fixed. The question was about which are the most relevant, let's say, legislative files which need to be addressed in order to achieve this. There are many examples of this. I think we have an opportunity in front of us as Europeans, which is the European Digital Omnibus, which is basically a piece of legislation. Mr. Damianou could explain this better than me, but it's a piece of legislation where the European Commission will address a series of different pieces of legislation to make them more adapt, to adjust them to the current times, basically. And I would mention two pieces of legislation which I think can be addressed through the legislative process called omnibus legislation. The first one is the AI Act, because I think we need to acknowledge that the final phase of the AI Act negotiations was rushed and led to a last-minute decision in a moment where few years ago, when the technology was not completely understood and where their opportunities were not completely clear. The AI Act, as it is now, brings a lot of uncertainty to companies, big and small, and I think is some sort of is something that cannot incentivize companies to experiment and to produce innovation here in Europe. Because I agree with Mr. Damianou that one of the challenges we face is to have our talents, European talents, to take risks here, to experiment, to do something new here at home in Europe. But in order to do that, we need to fix something in the regulatory landscape, and the AI Act it would be a good beginning. For example, the way in which AI high-risk systems and models are identified is not completely clear, and what we propose is to have what we call a stop-the-clock period 2 years in which the entry into force of the AI Act would be suspended in order to bring the AI Act up to speed with the new challenges. And I think this would be a good opportunity also for the upcoming Cypriot EU presidency of the EU Council in the first half of 2026 to address this. And the second point is the GDPR. Of course, we totally agree that privacy is something that needs to be protected, is a human right, but at the same time, the way in which the GDPR is implemented or is enforced, better enforced, is not always consistent with the pace of innovation. And one of the things we could do in order to adapt the GDPR to the new innovation context is to make innovation a core objective of the GDPR, including an objective for Data Protection Authority. I will go into some details hopefully later, but I think, for example, the idea that the right to innovation is something that needs to be taken into consideration in the balance of the different rights is something that would be good to embed within the GDPR through the omnibus digital process. So I will pause here. Two closing considerations. The first one is that I think Cyprus government has a great occasion and a great opportunity to contribute strongly to this idea of make better the EU legislation for European citizens and European innovators. And the second one is that this idea that the AI Act and the GDPR needs to be revised through the digital omnibus process was also confirmed or exposed by Draghi's comment. I think it was on September 16th, the big event in Brussels, 1 year after the presentation, the publication of his report. Thank you, Joanna.
Great, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Azzarello. Right, I'm gonna pose one last question to each of you. Now, Mr. Damianou, tech giants have unprecedented reach and technological capabilities that can strengthen democratic societies. How does Cyprus envision these platforms contributing positively in supporting EU innovation and enhancing AI technologies?
Thank you. First of all, let me say that essentially listening to Fábio is not the first time I've been exposed to this sort of concerns. And we need to understand that we have our values as Europe on one side, which says that we are a society that values human rights, transparency, security, and so on. And on the other side, we have the industry, and the industry is composed of the big tech companies, the SMEs. In Cyprus, 99% of the companies are SMEs, which have concerns. So we need to listen to these concerns. So what we intend to do is what we call, and that will be the theme throughout our presidency, will be what we call smart simplification. So the digital omnibus package is, of course, the platform to look into each one of these concerns. But going to your question about the big tech, we do not subscribe to the narrative that says we should build regulation that blocks non-EU companies, big tech companies from entering the market and so on. As I said, these big tech companies, first of all, are embedded in, let's call it, our technology stack throughout Europe, and this is a fact. And also they bring with them a lot of technological advancements and capabilities that can be leveraged by our SMEs, by our businesses to scale globally. So we need them. They are part of this, of the technology landscape, and that's a fact. But that's one dimension. The other dimension is that I need I think they need to understand that they should be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I'm not saying that there's problems everywhere, but there are specific issues that we want to tackle as Europe. And one thing is what I mentioned earlier, protection of minors online. That's one thing. Combating disinformation or misinformation is another. And ensuring algorithmic transparency, which becomes more and more important under the new AI world, are some examples of that. So if they understand that and they play with us, they work with us, I think this would be the best. Let me also say that as Cyprus, we have already stated that not only the digital sphere, but across the policy files, we will also be reaching out to the southern regions, the Middle East, India as well. So we don't think that Europe should be isolated in an effort to become sovereign or autonomous, because that's something that often gets misunderstood. So I think there are also ways, once we are aligned, to ensure that big tech companies with their funding, with their expertise, can contribute positively, for example, they can be part of R&D projects, R&I projects in Europe, co-funding projects like that. Cybersecurity might be another domain, and so on. So that's my overall take in terms of big tech in Europe. That's a summary, Flavio.
Great, thank you very much. And one last question for...
By the way, just a quick one, sorry to interrupt you. I didn't know that there are 270 regulators, to be honest, but I'm not surprised. So.
Right, and one last question for Mr. Argyrilou. So as AI continues to reshape industries and public life, there is growing concern about its impact on human decision-making and workforce dynamics. Looking ahead, how does Meta envision deploying AI responsibly in Europe?
Well, first of all, I think that this is part of our mission. Meta is well known, of course, for our platforms, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Threads. But as you may know, we also develop Llama, which is our large language model. I want to stress one point about Llama. Llama is open source. What does it mean, open source? It means that the code and the weights are available to everyone. So basically, developers can download for free and build their own application use cases on our large language model. We don't provide cloud services, so what it means that Llama can be installed on your own premises, or you can use the cloud service you provide. This is an important point also in terms of security or concerns that some of them were also mentioned by Mr. Damianou. And there is another point I want to make. So sometimes our tools are seen, and it of course is the truth, as a way to build communities and express ideas from people, but they are also means which allow small and medium enterprises to grow. Personalized ads is a great part of this story, because basically through personalized ads, small and medium enterprises, or also big enterprises, big companies, can find their own audiences, their own clients, their own markets. And this has an impact all across Europe, and so I just wanted to re-emphasize what Mr. Damianou said. We are here to help European businesses to succeed. And just to give you some numbers, Meta's advertising platforms were linked to 213 billion euro in economic activity and 1.44 million jobs across the European Union. So our services has an impact, and this is another point I want to re-emphasize from my previous point, which is basically that when you, as the European Union, pass a law or regulate the digital space, you need to understand that it's an ecosystem. So it's pretty difficult to, for example, regulate one service and not another one, because as also Mr. Damianou mentioned, you know, our services are part of the technological stack, and so basically many enterprises in Europe rely on our services, and so this needs to be, it's a point that needs to be strongly taken into consideration. One last point on minors and safety, because I think it's something that was mentioned significantly by Mr. Damianou, insisted significantly on this point. I think we fully agree that something needs to be done from a regulatory perspective here. We recently said that we support the idea of a digital minority age, so which means basically an age below that age, a parental consent would be needed for children for minors to access digital services. Of course, it's not up to us establish which is the appropriate digital minority age, majority age, sorry. It's up to the legislators, but we endorse and support this concept. At the same time, we think that it needs to be done consistently across Europe. So we need to have the same rules across the 27 member states. And the second point, that is another important one, that in our vision, this needs to be done either at operative system level or app store level, which means basically that you need to have the same rules applying across all the services you access through your device. So basically why we say at operative system level or app store level, because it's the more upstream place when you can put this control. You know that there are hundreds of apps. Many of them are accessed on a daily basis by users, and so you know, put this kind of control in place at operative system level or app store level and consistently across the European Union would be the most efficient way to address this topic. And of course, we look forward to working with the Cyprus presidency on this topic as part of many other challenges we were facing together. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for this insightful comment. Now it's time for some Q&As from the audience.
Hello. Hi, my name is Bidon. I am from Policy Press. I'd like to ask you both, because we've talked about GDPR, protecting the minors, and I'd like to ask you both about the sensitivity the public has about certain regulations, such as EU chat control was proposed. And that opened up a whole new conversation about whether there's going to be surveillance around these apps that people are going to use. So I'd like to ask you, what's the framework and what would be the way to approach while protecting the EU values of people's data protection, while at the same time maybe facilitating cooperating with Meta and WhatsApp?
Should I go first here? So thank you for the question, a particularly difficult question, to be honest. But getting to that, one comment that comes to mind when Fábio mentions llama. So imagine what would happen, and this is towards your question, imagine what would happen when the big tech companies that are building these models, the llamas and ChatGPTs of this world, embed in these algorithms an objective function that says maximize engagement. So we will be entering a new era of much more intense than the one we are living in with social media, the social media effect or the Google effect, as some call it, or the Facebook effect. So we need to have transparency in terms of the algorithms. I'm glad that Fábio mentioned the fact that Llama is open source. That's part of the equation. Now, in terms of how do you control all that and how do you preserve your fundamental principles of human protection and human rights and transparency and so on. There's no easy answer to that, but what I can say is that there is a very strong regulatory fabric in Europe that, and a regulatory base that is not going to change. We are talking about simplification, first of all. We are not talking about getting rid of GDPR or our main principles. We are talking about simplifying them, making them enforceable in an easier way by the companies, because that's important. The AI Act, for example, mentioned before by Fábio, I realize that many companies don't understand what they need to do. So we need to change that. But we have such a strong regulatory base that I'm not worried we will violate we will change it and violate the very basic principles that we want to adhere to. Now, there's no easy answer in terms of technically how you do that, but you definitely need to work with the big tech companies. You cannot do it through enforcing legislative instruments and so on. There needs to be this cooperation to find the best way to control what happens online, in social media, or with AI proliferation now in everything that we do. That would be a sort of an answer to your question, but that's what I can say at this point.
No, thank you. So first, I will try to answer your question, and then a comment on what just Mr. Damianou just said. So the question on the thing. So first of all, WhatsApp, which is the service, the messaging service provided by us, is end-to-end encrypted, which means basically that no one can see or access what people exchange through WhatsApp. This is a key point of our service, and this is also, I think, something that is one of the reasons why people choose WhatsApp instead of other services, for example. Is a sort of, you have some guarantees when you access our services, and anything that will disrupt end-to-end encryption will be detrimental to our service. That's our point on what you asked. So basically, the encryption is embedded in our service and is one of the things people rely on when they access WhatsApp. Also, just to be clear, for example, we just based our, let's say, security checks on WhatsApp on signals. So basically on the way people behave and not by scanning the content, because no one, neither us nor governments nor other people, can access private conversations on WhatsApp. And so basically we will not support any kind of legislation which would be detrimental to that. On the last comment from Mr. Damianou, there's one angle I would like to add to the equation, let's say, which is basically the fact that AI and innovation in general are not only, let's say, boosters for economic opportunities, but they are also means by which peoples can expand their rights. For example, imagine, in the domain of healthcare, how many new things you can do because of AI. Also, recent Nobel Prizes, etc., were awarded because their achievements in significant domain influenced by AI or thanks to AI. Think, for example, to the defense space. Things, for example, to the science and the right to know new things. So basically, I think this angle, we call this the right to innovation, which is both the right for people to innovate, but also the right for people to access latest developments from innovation. I think this needs to be part of the equation. And when I said that this needs to be embedded in the GDPR as part of the digital omnibus process, this is what I was referring to. So, of course, privacy is super important, and what I mentioned about our encryption services is there to testify also our strong commitment towards privacy. But at the same time, you know, the innovation is something that can expand people's rights, and I think this needs to be part of the equation when we discuss how to balance the different rights within the European culture and with our cultural backgrounds as European citizens.
Just a warranted clarification to your question. Coming after what Fábio said, we do not intend, and we're not going to be enforcing legislation that says, in the name of protecting minors online or whatever, you are forced to give us personal data of your users or whatever. There are other ways to enforce and protect people online and to enforce this sort of more fair, more sustainable, more transparent environment, digital environment, and we do not intend to do that. Okay, just to clarify.
Great, thank you very much both. Do we have any more questions?
Hello, my name is Maxim, University of Nicosia. So my question is the following. Now with the rise of artificial intelligence, we have unfortunately seen also a huge rise of misinformation and even disinformation spread over the social media with the videos of politicians saying things which they never said, the videos which were generated by using the artificial intelligence technology. So my question to both of you is, how do we reconcile, on the one hand, the right of free speech that every person has, and on the other hand, the right of, let's say, each person to his or her face and, say, personality? For example, I can cite the recent Danish legislative initiative, which would give all the citizens of this country full control over their facial characteristics, over their personal characteristics, so that they cannot be used in deepfake technology. Thank you.
I'm sorry, may we have some quick comments from you due to time restraints, if that's
Just
possible?
a very quick one. You're pointing to deepfakes, for example. That's the obvious. Well, deepfakes are the most violent way of violating someone's identity. So it's clearly legal and there's no question about it. It's a matter of how do you technically prevent it, first of all, which is one angle of it, one aspect of it, and then what legislation can put in place to prevent it. But it's clear that it's illegal and we need to treat it as such.
Super quickly, the first point is that, of course, the freedom of speech is at the very core of our platforms. And recently, for example, we moved towards a community notes-based system, which would allow us to scale at the dimension at which we need to work, because also I want to remind that our services has more than 3 billion users, which means that anything we develop needs to work at that scale, the first point. The second point is on deepfakes and in general, you know, fakes produced with AI tools. We are developing with the whole industry interoperable standards in order to identify deepfake, but also I want to stress a point here. The point is that AI allows us to help us to make our platform safer more than helps malicious actors to do what they want to do. So basically also here we have to see the full picture, and the full picture says that AI helps us a lot in terms of safety on our platforms. That's mostly it from my side. I think there is a common challenge we should carry out together, which is education. I think there is a common effort which needs to be done to educate people first to a correct use of the AI, generative AI in particular, and second, to be in a position to identify what is a legitimate content and what is a malicious content. This is a common effort, and each of us needs to do their part.
Great, thank you very much. This fireside discussion has come to an end. Thank you all for attending. Thank you both for being here with us and sharing these insightful comments. And have a great day.